Thank you so much for Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for having me again at Confidence. I'm so grateful to be counted among such legends at this edition of Confidence. My name is Sveva Vittoria Scenarelli. I am a senior threat intelligence analyst at PwC. And in my day-to-day, my main focus is on tracking advanced persistent threats based in the Asia-Pacific region, including China-based and North Korea-based threat actors. We have quite a packed agenda today, in fact, so let me just walk you through it real quick. So we're going to have a bird's eye view at the start of North Korea-based threat actors, particularly Lazarus Group, which PwC tracks internally as Black Artemis, and their pursuit of cryptocurrency companies for the past around 4 years. We're going to look specifically at true intrusion sets that we also assess to be likely based in North Korea that target cryptocurrency. And we call these Black Alicanto and Black Dev2. So in the talk, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of their intrusion chains and what you can expect in the initial access and initial phases of compromise by these threat actors, so you can recognize their campaigns, you can hunt for them and defend from them, should you ever encounter them. And then we're gonna look at how and whether at all Black Alicanto and Black Dev2 have any links to Black Artemis, that is Lazarus Group. So without further ado, since we have a lot to be covering, let's get started. Let's get started with the timeline of, threat actors targeting cryptocurrency. We all know that Lazarus is famous for cyber heists against financial institutions, whether that be Bank of Bangladesh or Red Bank. But then since about 2017, North Korea-based APTs start targeting cryptocurrency companies. Now, Lazarus Group, for example, starts by making off with $5 million from Yapizon, a South Korean cryptocurrency exchange. And not happy with that, after Yapizon rebrands to Ubit, well, in late 2017, Lazarus compromises Ubit again and makes off with 17% of the company's total funds, which means that actually Ubit has to file for bankruptcy. In the meantime, Lazarus has also compromised other cryptocurrency exchanges such as Coinbase, a Slovenian cryptocurrency company. And then this trend spills over in 2018 when the threat actor compromises cryptocurrency exchanges across South Korea, Japan, Indonesia. At the same time, the threat actor starts developing Trojanized cryptocurrency trading applications that get installed by unknowing victims, and then they get their crypto stolen. But then in 2018 also, there starts being reports of an unknown intrusion set that phishes cryptocurrency companies with, lure documents and link files, and specifically a link file called password.txt.link. So much so that the Chinese threat intelligence company that reported first on this called this intrusion set DangerousPassword. In 2019, F-Secure releases a report about Lazarus Group and about a campaign targeting the cryptocurrency vertical. And in this report, there is an explicit connection that is drawn between the tools, techniques, and procedures being used by Lazarus and the DangerousPassword intrusion set. If we skip ahead, in 2020, Lazarus continues compromising financial entities and cryptocurrency entities, including one in New York. And then a report comes out about another little known intrusion set, Operation Gold Hunting, which also targets cryptocurrency companies and investment and venture capital firms. So I want you to remember these two names, DangerousPassword, which we internally call Black Alicanto, and Operation Gold Hunting, which we internally call at PwC Black Dev2. As you can see, the trend of stealing cryptocurrency is significant for North Korea-based threat actors, and later we're going to touch on why. But let's, without further ado, jump into the thick of it, and let's start with Black Alicanto. So this threat actor has actually been known for quite a while. It's active since at least April 2018, and it is known in open source by a lot of different names. And I'm going to be really sorry, this presentation is going to be full of names. So the aliases that Black Alicanto goes by are DangerousPassword, LeeryTurtle, CryptoMimic, CryptoCore, and Operations Not Crypto. There are several reports in open source detailing this threat actor, and you will be able to find all of the ones that I gathered in the references that are at the bottom of this slide deck, just in case you want to consult them in your own time later. Black Alicanto is financially motivated, and its targeting, despite being focused on cryptocurrency, actually is very international. It doesn't necessarily matter where the company is based, more so what it does. In terms of the intrusion chain that you can expect to encounter when you are targeted by Black Alicanto or when you're tracking this threat actor, well, the victim would receive a phishing email with a compressed archive. And this compressed archive would contain two files. One Leer document that is password protected, and one file called password.txt.link. So the victim would reasonably think, oh, well, you know, I need a password to open this file. There's a file called password here. I should reasonably open it, right? Wrong, because the double extension means that this is a link file. And what this link file will do is connect through a bit.ly shortened URL to a first stage command and control server. And from there will come the password used to unlock the document that will be displayed to the user, and also CabbageRat. CabbageRat is a first stage VB script kind of backdoor that is dropped by a JavaScript file. What CabbageRat does is it connects back to the first stage command and control server. It places a link file in startup to ensure that the backdoor is persistent across system reboots, and will, in some cases, download a further VB script backdoor known as CabbageRat-B, which acts very much as a profiler, you know, giving a more in-depth view to the threat actor of who the victim is that it compromised. And now the threat actor can choose whether the victim that has been infected is of interest or not. If it is not, well, then the intrusion chain roughly stops here. But if the victim is of interest, then the threat actor will start, you know, the kind of hands-on keyboard manual exploitation and manually deploy a further payload, another VB script backdoor, but much fully featured than the other one before it, called CabbageRat-C, which even has a different command and control server. CabbageRat-C then might execute commands, might, you know, fingerprint the system, and might also be used, again, to manually deploy an even more sophisticated payload that is known as MSO-Rat. Please remember that name, because it's going to come up again and again in this presentation. So looking at the initial access phase of Black Alicanto, we've already mentioned the use of compressed archives and the combo of the password protected Leer document and the password.txt.link file. Alternative types of initial infection come when the threat actor might send a malicious document with macros to a target and ask them to enable the macros, and then the macros would reach out to the bit.ly URL shortened link and connect to the first stage command and control server. Or the threat actor might use double extension files. For example, you know, the .docx.link or .pdf.link file. In terms of the themes that the Leer documents have, there's of course an emphasis on cryptocurrency. The threat actor might also use job descriptions for specific, you know, roles like cryptocurrency companies. And the threat actor might even use more business themes, such as, you know, oh, here's your salary plan for the year, or, you know, this is your personal development plan. And an employee at a company might reasonably expect to receive emails like that, so might be more prone to opening the malicious attachment. On the topic of job descriptions, while I was preparing for this presentation last week, my colleagues and I stumbled across some very interesting Black Alicanto files, you know, made in September 2021. And these files use the job description theme and double extension combo. It is a technique that the threat actor was using in 2018. So you can see them here on screen. They reference Blockchain Intelligence Group, which is an on-chain analysis platform. You can see Salt Lending, which is provider of crypto-backed loans. And then you can see JP Morgan Chase, which is a prominent financial institution that also has some initiatives around cryptocurrency. A few nuggets that I wanted to point out here are that, first of all three documents have the same picture, which says, if you check, you know, the image, it says Chase, like JP Morgan Chase, but you know, that doesn't really fit in well with the fact that there are several companies being impersonated. Then you will notice that the blockchain intelligence group document actually referenced in the description Commerce Real AG, which is an investment and real estate kind of firm. And then also the description, you know, when you work for company XYZ, by engineering the future well-being of humanity, blah, 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 that is literally lifted straight out of the Lockheed Martin careers website. So there's a lot of really weird things going on here. And Black Alicanto is generally coherent in its Leery documents. So it almost feels like the threat actor had an intern and told the intern, oh, you know, we need some Leery documents, so that's going to be your project. And then this is the result. But, you know, jokes aside, one hint about finding more Black Alicanto Leery documents is to examine the machine ID of the link files. This is because unless the threat actor decides to rip off the metadata, the machine ID will be the same across link files that have been generated on the same system. And that can be very useful to identify further samples, indicators to block, or also to pivot on to find more of the campaign. Let's talk about infrastructure, because of course, no malicious campaign is complete without its infrastructure. And the threat actor has very specific ways of setting that up. It registers domains, mostly through Porcupine. And these domains mostly mimic, you know, Google Drive, Google Cloud, Microsoft Cloud products, with this whole theme of like, oh, I'm sharing a document with you, or I'm hosting a document for you, or this is the cloud service for XYZ. And then the threat actor might also decide to impersonate specific cryptocurrency companies. For example, here on screen, like towards the left side, you see several cryptocurrency companies such as Fidelity Digital Assets being spoofed. But anyways, after the threat actor sets up all these domains and registers them, it will point them likely to a same IP address. So if you run passive DNS on a first domain that you've identified, find the IP and then run passive DNS on that, you can quite easily pivot around and find much more of the campaign infrastructure being used by the threat actor. And sometimes the threat actor might register an SSL certificate and then deploy that on multiple servers that it uses, which again helps us. We like when threat actors make these mistakes or these miscalculations. Speaking about servers, there are several technology components that are found on servers that Black Alicanto has set up. We should mention that whenever the threat actor is using a specific IP address, all the domains on there will be Black Alicanto for that specific period of time. And you will also be able to notice when Black Alicanto was using that specific server, because there will be a set of specific technology components being installed. For example, specific versions of Apache, OpenSSL, and PHP that you can see here on screen. The threat actor will also leave open only a few ports, 443, 3389, 8080, and sometimes, rarely, the threat actor might also use temporarily 21 for FTP, 445 for SMB, and 1433 for MS SQL, which, you know, are the kind of technologies that the threat actor uses to manage the server. You know, I could talk about infrastructure fingerprinting all day, but Takaki Kodara has actually given a brilliant talk about, you know, Black Alicanto's infrastructure. And so I would really recommend that if you're interested in this, you go and watch that talk, or at least read the presentation. I have linked it, you know, at the bottom of my presentation, like in the slides, for the references, so you can find it there. So far at a glance, we've given a decent overview of what to expect about, you know, the initial access phases of Black Alicanto's intrusions. We've talked about how to pivot across link files, across Leery documents, across domains and IP addresses, as well as how to use SSL certificates to find further infrastructure. But there is one item that we have not touched on, and which I promised we would mention again in this presentation, and that is MSO-RAT. Now, MSO-RAT was so called by Antifi Security that gave a very good presentation on CryptoMimic that is Black Alicanto. And the characteristic of MSO-Rat is that not just PwC, but several other companies in the public domain have mentioned how similar it is to backdoors employed by Lazarus Group, and more specifically by the Lazarus Group subgroup known as Blue North, a financially motivated subgroup. So I have included here some hashes of MSO-Rat that you can start pivoting on to find more samples and do your own analysis. But just as an overview, all of these samples contain matching RC4 encryption routines, same section structure of the PEs and same execution flow, despite being packed. So, you would have to unpack them to see all of that. They're packed with VM Protect and Temida, and for example, there is a definite correspondence between MSO-Rat that entity security talks about and the backdoor mentioned by F-Secure in their report about Lazarus targeting cryptocurrency. It's highly likely the same backdoor, just slightly modified. And likewise, F-Secure, in attributing this to Lazarus Group, pointed to an almost identical backdoor having already been deployed in Operation Kill Disk, while Clear Sky, in their analysis of MSO-Rat, pointed out that this backdoor had the same code base as a 2016 Blue North samples. And that's a long pedigree for a backdoor, even through all these changes to find connections back to 2016 code base is a definitely interesting link. So, malware is never enough for attribution. I would caution anyone against thinking that malware alone is sufficient to attribute activity. So I decided to look at the infrastructure. And what I noticed is that starting from a cluster of password.txt.link files that are dated around 2020, if we run passive DNS on the initial C2 servers, we could basically get back really quickly to domains that were being used as initial access domains by F-Secure's, by Lazarus in the report published by F-Secure, and other Lazarus infrastructures. So, it all comes full circle. It's not just MSO-Rat, it's also infrastructure that you can pivot across. And at the same time, F-Secure, in publishing this Lazarus report, was also calling back the activity mentioning DangerousPassword, which is an alias for Black Alicanto. So, we've come full circle. If we take a step back and we examine this at a higher level perspective using the Diamond module of intrusion analysis, which is a great framework for performing structured clustering of intrusion sets, we can actually see several similarities between the kind of Lazarus subgroup Blue North, at least in the way it's described in several reports by F-Secure, for example, and Black Alicanto. We see the use of bit.ly links, of several domains having the XYZ top level domain, which is not really common. We also see domain spoofing Microsoft and Google and the theme of hosting or cloud, and cryptocurrency themes as well. Although Black Alicanto maybe focuses more on the pork band registrar, while it has not been seen as much in Blue North. We also see the corresponding, initial access intrusion chain with the password.txt file and several stage of Devi script files, the use of MSO-Rat, and of course, the targeting. The targeting matches, which is the cryptocurrency and financial sector, for financially motivated purposes, although the targeting itself is international and geographically distributed. So we have overlaps across capabilities, infrastructure, and victims. So I would say that that's enough to have at least, a fairly confident assessment that what might be the case from our internal visibility and collection and open source evidence presented, that Black Alicanto, the DangerousPassword intrusion set, is highly likely a subset or a spin-off subgroup of Blue North that is in itself a subgroup of what is known as the Lazarus umbrella. I know, it's a lot to take in, so we can take a bit of a breath. It's a lot of information, and that's why I'm glad that this talk should be recorded, so hopefully you can rewatch it and make sense of what I'm saying. But I also promised that we were going to talk about Black Theft 2, so if that's all right, I'm going to move on and talk to you a bit about that. So Black Theft 2 is another threat actor that targets cryptocurrency, and this is the kind of intrusion chain that you can expect to see if you're ever targeted by or if you're ever tracking Black Theft 2. Now, in some cases, the threat actor might send a phishing email with a compressed archive. In some cases, the threat actor just delivers in some way a malicious document lure to the victim of interest. This malicious document actually is built to weaponize remote template injection. What that means is that once the victim opens the malicious document, this will fetch a remote template from a remote server that is the first stage command and control and payload staging server. And this remote template will have malicious macros in it. What the macros will do is that they will look for a picture inside the original malicious document, decode it into an executable payload, load the DLL into memory via process injection, and then this DLL will connect back to the command and control server. And then it's only at this point, if the victim is of interest, because this DLL payload is a profiler, a victim profiler, if the victim is of interest, the threat actor might decide to then deploy manually further capabilities, including, yes, I know you've guessed it already, MSO rat. Now, if we look at how BlackDev2 phishes targets, this threat actor that is active since at least August 2020, and that is known as Operation Gold Counting and Operation /Crypto, Kaspersky actually clusters these two threat actors, Black Alicanto and BlackDev2 together. The threat actor has made a few mistakes over time that allows us to connect its campaigns. One of them is using very similar word templates across all the Lure documents minted by its operators. And one of these is insert your first table of contents tutorial.docx. So if you pivot on that, you will actually be able to find malicious Lure documents that perform remote template injection that are the BlackDev2 ones. In terms of themes that the threat actor uses, the titles are generally referencing, and the contents, non-disclosure agreements, ISO 27001, which is really ironic because as information security professionals, you will know that this is the standard for information security. So it's quite funny that the threat actor mentions that. A lot of documents will purport to be protected by Microsoft Azure, protected by Kaspersky, as you can see on the first Lure from the top. And a lot of actual Lure documents will be themed around presentations or pitches, as if the threat actor was trying to get funding or venture capital from some investors. There are also overlaps, not just on the themes, but on the monikers for authors that the threat actors operators have left in. So if we look at this, that's actually a very good way of pivoting around Lure documents. If you pivot around an author metadata of Nord, you will find several malicious documents doing remote template injection that are BlackDev2s. If you pivot around the author Never, you will also find several malicious documents doing remote template injection that are BlackDev2s. And several of these actually overlap in the themes that they use. So there are several items that you can use to pivot around and find more BlackDev2 documents. And from there, you can find more infrastructure. If we talk a tiny bit about the macros and the DLL payload, what the malicious macros in the remote template exactly do is roughly, they locate a resource in the original file, then they decode this image. They basically turn it into a, PE format, and then they inject this payload, which is a DLL, into either a system process or another process that is maybe hard-coded, such as a Notepad++. The DLL payload itself is 32-bit. It's packed with the MIDA, at least the one we have observed, but it might also be packed with BMProtect, for example. Its name is generally default.rdp, although the threat actor can easily change that. And it is roughly a victim profiler and a backdoor. And I've included a hash for you below so you can start pivoting around and signature and find more samples if you're interested. In terms of, the backdoor that the full RDP deploys, there is actually more. It's always, an intrusion chain with several steps. We have seen at least 2 cases where MSO rat was deployed through the full RDP manually. And we have identified at least 2 samples of MSO rat that we assess were used by BlackDev2. And essentially, MSO rat is packed like in the other cases we observed, this variant has the same exported functions as we have seen, for example, in Black Alicantos and Lazarus payloads. It has the same structure and sections, same visible strings. Not only, it even hits on our Yara rules that we made for some Lazarus malicious DLLs back in 2017. So again, quite a long pedigree here for this code base and this backdoor. So at this point, we're left with 3 different threat actors, different, maybe not so much, using MSO rat. And those are Lunarov, the subset of Lazarus group, which we call Black Artemis, Black Alicanto, which we assess to be a subset or spin-off of Lunarov, and Black Death 2. But we have to hold our horses because we have said that we will not attribute based on malware alone because that would be a tragic mistake. So let's look at something else before. Let's look at the infrastructure that Black Death 2 uses so you can recognize it, fingerprint it, hunt for it, protect from it. So the threat actor will register domains that imitate specific investment or cryptocurrency entities, for example, absvc.japan.net. absvc is an actual Japanese venture capital company. The threat actor might also register domains that imitate Microsoft or Google or cloud or file storage systems. You know, you see here protect azuredrive.com, or domains that might be a mix of the 2 naming schemas above. So you see here protect.andcapital.us. Again, this threat actor as well, Black Death 2 as well, just like Black Alicanto, registers a bunch of domains, although this threat actor prefers Namecheap and Namesilo instead of port 1, and will point several of these domains to the same IP address. So again, passive DNS is your friend if you want to find further infrastructure and malware being used in a Black Death 2 campaign. Just rely on passive DNS, and that's a really good start. In terms of the server and the technology components that are deployed in these servers, we see again that Black Death 2 also likes to use Apache, OpenSSL, and PHP on Windows 64 machines with specific versions. Now, you know, you can tell me, Sveva, you know, literally like everyone under the sun uses Apache, OpenSSL, and PHP. That's not groundbreaking. And I'm gonna absolutely agree with you. I'm just saying that it's interesting to see 2 threat actors like Black Alicanto and Black Death 2 building infrastructure in a very similar way, registering their own domains with very similar themes and keywords, impersonating cryptocurrency companies and deploying the same technologies, just slightly different versions on their servers. That's what I'm saying. And this is also useful because if you identify some infrastructure that might be Black Death 2 and you're not quite sure, looking at the technology components deployed on the server might actually help you give that confidence that you're actually looking at Black Death 2 infrastructure. And Black Death 2 as well makes some operational security mistakes when it comes to certificates. So for example, in at least one case, we observed the threat actor registering an SSL certificate for one domain and then deploying it on a whole bunch of others. So that definitely helps finding, you know, the broader scope of the campaign. So whenever you find mistakes like this, it's very useful to exploit them for your own intelligence purposes. So at a glance, if we wrap this up a bit, we've actually also built a decent picture of what you might see if Black Death 2 targets your company, or if you're tracking Black Death 2, this is kind of roughly what you can expect to see in the initial stages of an intrusion. Something I forgot to mention is that the IP addresses that Black Death 2 uses to set up its command control servers are mostly on host wins. So that's another item that you can use for tracking and fingerprinting. In terms of the entities that Black Death 2 has impersonated so far, well, there are several batches of documents and each of them impersonate different entities, right? But what's interesting is that all of these companies operate either directly in the cryptocurrency vertical or in the venture capital, investment, or financial services sectors, but companies that have a specific interest or investment in blockchain and cryptocurrency, as well as other more like cutting edge technologies. So that's an element to keep in mind in terms of understanding how the threat actor operates. The distribution of these companies is quite international. The companies impersonated are mainly in Japan, and partly because Japan is a heavy user and adopter of cryptocurrency, and the industry is just starting now to be regulated really. But there is also a lot of companies impersonated in the United States, particularly in the venture capital space, as well as, you know, all around the globe, really on an international scale. You can see a map on screen of that. So I have a little Easter egg for you. You know, they say that time is money, so I decided to spend my time and my company's money plotting all the creation and last modified times of the Lure documents used by Black Dev 2. You know, you can ask me, why does that really matter? Is it really useful? I would say yes, that overall timelining campaigns and timelining artifacts like the creation and last modified times of your documents, or stuff like the compiled timestamp of binaries, can give a good picture of a campaign. Does it operate in batches? Is it active every day a little bit? But of course, it also depends on the maturity of your organization. If you work on an organization that maybe has a very small security team and is really setting up its security program and focusing on the basics like patching, securing systems, that's completely fine. And then this might not be as relevant to you. On the other hand, if you're a more mature consumer of threat intelligence, maybe have your threat intelligence program, this will be more useful because it can be an element towards attribution. Now let's look at these compiled timestamps, or well, creation and modified timestamps. You can see on the bottom left on the screen, when I was plotting them in UTC, there was a peak between you know, midnight and 4 a.m., then between 4 and 5, and then you know, until 5 p.m. And then between 5 p.m. and 11 p.m., absolutely nothing, zero. Which, you know, is very interesting. You know, there can be night owls that work all night and then some part of the day and then sleep in the afternoon. We don't judge anyone. Everyone has their own working patterns. But also these kind of look like maybe if I adjust the time zone, it might feel a little bit of a more working pattern, if you get what I mean. So that's what I did. I plotted these timings in very different time zones. And what I landed on ultimately was GMT +9, and that is Korean Standard Time. The reason for that is because no near neighbors of this time zone actually come close to having such a neat pattern. What you can see on screen is that the creation and last modified times of the 44 Lure documents by Black Dev 2 that we found actually have a very similar graph. There is, you know, close to no activity between roughly 11 p.m. midnight and then 8, 9 a.m., almost zero. And then there is a peak between like 9 and 12 or 9 and like 1 p.m. And then in both graphs between 12 to 2 p.m. or like maybe 1 to 2 p.m., nothing, nothing. I mean, I wouldn't want anyone to spoil my lunch break either, if you know what I mean. And then the activity resumes. There is in both graphs no activity recorded between 8 and 9 p.m. in Korean Standard Time, and then maybe a tiny bit of activity before, nothingness against the next morning. So, you know, of course, timelining is not a silver bullet. You can't really use it for attribution just by itself, but you can make two hypotheses. And one is that there is a threat actor, Black Dev 2, somewhere in the world that has operated for at least a year, an entire campaign in Korean Standard Time, maybe purposefully as a red herring, or maybe its operators just really like sleeping in the afternoon, or the threat actor is based in Korea. And dare I say, based on the other characteristics that we've seen of Black Dev 2, likely based in North Korea. So, we have given an overview of Black Alicanto, we've given an overview of Black Dev 2, and we highlighted several connections that these threat actors might have to Lazarus group, which we call Black Artemis, and specifically its subgroup, Blunroth. So let's connect the dots a bit. On one hand, we have Black Alicanto, the subset of Black Artemis, Blunroth, and Black Dev 2, all using MSO RAT as, you know, an advanced payload deployed only victims of interest. Then we have, in terms of infrastructure, Black Alicanto and Blunroth overlapping in terms of their initial access command and control infrastructure. As we mentioned, there are several cases where you can pivot back from Black Alicanto initial access domains to Lazarus initial access domains as attributed by F-Secure. In terms of Black Death 2, we can actually have an interesting connection in the sense that the domain avsvc.info resolved roughly at the same time to the same IP address that pokersonic.publicvm.com resolved to. And this domain, the PokerSonic, was actually used as a command and control server for a sample of the MSORAT variant that we said, that actually looks like Lazarus, but then MSORAT is also deployed by Black Death 2. And then between Black Alicanto and Black Death 2, we have two threat actors that use a very similar domain naming schema down to the top level domains that they use. They make similar mistakes with SSL certificates, deploy similar, even though not identical, server components. Both really like to just have neat chains of passive DNS connections. I really hope they're not listening, and if you do, if you're listening, please do not change that. We love that. And also, Bluenoff, Black Alicanto, and Black Death 2 would also all have an interest in cryptocurrency. So if we plot that again using the diamond model, and I realize this is a lot of information, so you can absolutely go and reread this in your own time if you're interested. We have overlaps across not just capabilities, but also infrastructure and victims. And it almost seems sometimes like Black Death 2 might be a bit of an evolution in the tradecraft that Black Alicanto uses. So our assessment at PwC, and this is entirely dependent on our internal visibility, collection, and the evidence that is publicly available. Other companies might have different visibility. We assess that Black Death 2 is actually likely to be the same threat actor as Black Alicanto. And we have already assessed that Black Alicanto is highly likely a subset or a spin-off group of Bluenoff, which is in itself a subgroup of the Lazarus umbrella. Yeah, I know, right? It's a lot to take in. There's a lot of analytical work going on here. Let's repeat that for a moment. Black Death 2, Operation Gold Hunting, is likely the same threat actor as Black Alicanto, DangerousPassword, which we assess to be, in fact, a subset or a spin-off of Bluenoff. Yep, that's a lot. So I'd like to touch on a couple of things on this topic. And one of them is that Black Artemis, Lazarus group, is a threat actor that is capable of building highly sophisticated payloads. And it's possible to trace a whole pedigree in its code base. And that is also the threat actor's Achilles heel. The code base reuse is what continues to allow analysts to build connections across newer and older Black Artemis operations. So whenever you encounter payloads, signature them, build YAR rules, build detections, and leave them there for some time, because you might never know. They might surprise you. The 2017 rule hitting on 2021 payloads was really interesting for us from an analytic perspective. And in terms of the focus on cryptocurrency by several North Korea-based threat actors, well, that's not going to go away anytime soon. Illegal financing is an existential imperative for North Korea and for North Korea-based threat actors. So long as the price of cryptocurrency continues to rise, so long as the industry is not well regulated yet, so long as it's not sufficiently protected, and so long as it's hard to recover the funds, we can definitely expect North Korea-based threat actors to continue on this line. Now, at the end of my presentation, I have included the Mitre attack mapping of the techniques that we've discussed so far in this presentation. And I've added the copy-pastable hashes of the Lure documents by Black Death 2 impersonating several VC and cryptocurrency firms, just, so you want to do more analysis. And then I've also included 2 pages of references to topics, that are of relevance to what we've discussed in this presentation. And, all of these being said, I'm just really glad that you listened to me for a whole 45 minutes. I am really glad you came to my presentation, and I'd love to hear from you, whether you have questions now or after the presentation. Please do get in touch. And thank you again for having me at Confidence. I'll give the line back to the studio.